and I'd like to welcome Jonathan Howe. Jim, are we ready to go? Jonathan?
Thank you, Diane. Thank you, everyone, for being here. This is, I guess, is the third or fourth event that we have done relative to what's happening out there today. Every morning I wake up with a little bit of a surprise as to where we are. The president announced by way of Twitter last night, apparently a immigration hold, no new visas being issued, etc., etc. What impact this will have on your programs, you need to evaluate for yourself. But the key element, we now have sort of conflicting ideas as to when we're going to get back to where we want to be. And the Center for Disease Control issued several days ago its guidelines for opening up America again. I always wondered whether maybe it would be opening America up again, but be that as it may. The key element, I think, right now that we all have to pay attention to is one more time taking a look at the crucial dates as to your programs as they're coming along, as to when you have to make a decision as to a go and a no-go. The real element here that's so of big concern is, number one, at the top of your list, what are the things that are in the best interest of your attendees, the best interest of the people who are going to be supporting that event, and whether the event sponsors and the like are still going to be there because the economic reason for them being there probably has changed. And as we look at this, at least once a week, I gather all my attorneys together for a Zoom meeting. And our meeting took place this morning, and we discussed exactly what's going on. Of key concern in that discussion were issues of insurance. Are our clients covered? Do they have their policies? A key element in that is you've got to look beyond the cancellation provisions of your special policies. You need to look at all of your comprehensive general liability and the rest of that. And I'm sure that Larry's going to address that right after I'm done, and certainly will do a better job than I just did as to how this all plays out. The key element, though, is we have lots of resources out there, and we're not really sure how to tap into those resources. Now, more than ever, we need to take advantage of those people who we've been working with over the years, our banker, our consultants, our lawyer, our accountant, our insurance broker, just to see what might be there for our benefit. Trina will talk about the opportunities that perhaps, should the Democrats and Republicans ever manage to get together relative to extending the payroll protection program and the like, and what that may mean to you, and more importantly, in some respects, what it might mean to your customers who suddenly have found themselves in a certain degree of financial displeasure. When I mentioned the opening up America again, it went through phases of 3. But the first aspect of it, what are the criteria before you even get to the phase? So the proposed state or regional criteria, and I might mention I just watched Governor Cuomo, he might like to be president, Governor Cuomo of New York's press conference. I think he does a pretty good job every day of sort of putting it in real talk and straight talk of how things are done. But he said New York now is going to begin to look at regional openings. Every state is different. Every locality is different. In Georgia, for example, the governor is trying to open up the state, but the mayor of Atlanta this morning went online and said, well, I don't agree with the governor. We're going to be a little bit more strict than what's there. So we have all elements and all areas of government that we need to be concerned with as we make our decisions in going forward. The demographics of your group are so important. Do you have people who are at risk? And that's one of the criteria that is introduced in the proposed phased approach to reopening America. And for example, we have a lot of individuals, I might include myself in that, as to who would be considered to be at risk. So your age matters, your pre-existing conditions matter, your past medical history matter, and those all become a concern that we need to address. It may not get you out of the contract, but it does make you a sensitive person to the type of people who are going to be coming to your program, your events. The key element here, let me stress again, number one on everybody's agenda, what is going to be in the best interest of the safety and health of the people who are going to be coming to my event or would like to come to my event. The second element is the people who have to serve that event, the people who have to provide the wherewithal to make that event successful. And so we put a little bit of a burden back on the venue, back on the vendor as to what they can do. Can they really meet all of the obligations under your contract to provide the services, the rooms, the amenities that are so important to the success of your event? Ask that question. So often when we're talking to people on the other side, so to speak, you ask them, how prepared are you to deliver? Just like they're going to ask you, how prepared are you to deliver? And I think we're beginning to find some degree of middle ground. We're now out to canceling programs through the end of June. We're looking at July, August, and September. A lot of this is going to be matched by what's going on in the industry. For example, I live in Chicago. They have just canceled some of the major galas and musical events through the end of May that would have occurred in Chicago. Stay tuned. They'll be canceling those in June and July, I am sure, as well. We have a whole bunch of items that come into play. With the immigration delay, we need to ask ourselves, how many people do we have who might be affected? More importantly also, is the number of people who are here in the United States who may have green cards that are expiring, and what is that going to mean relative to their ability to provide services to our programs overall? So we need to look at that. We also need to look at what's required for the phasing and the opening of 1, 2, or 3. But you got to look first at what the criteria are. And there has to be a downward trajectory of documented cases over a period of time, over a 14-day period. We have to see that hospitals are able to treat patients without crisis care requirements. In other words, what about those who might have been injured in an automobile accident, tripped or fell in their house, need a leg set, or whatever it might be? How capable are those health or hospitals going to be to take care of those? And are we seeing a downward trajectory in COVID-19 and really any kind of influenza-like illness? Those are part of the criteria. And to get all of the details on this, I recommend and suggest to you, you go to the Center of Disease Control website and go and look at Opening Up America Again category at that website. It'll give you a lot of information. But then we get down to phase 1 and we get down to some of the other, before we get there, as to the criteria as to what we have to have. One of the requirements for employers, social distancing and protective equipment as the need may be. Temperature checks, sanitation requirements, the use and disinfection of various areas within your office space, your workplace, the convention space. How many hotels, how many venues are really going to have disinfection take place to the satisfaction of health officials in order for them to reopen or to be open at all? Business travel, the recommendation is non-essential business travel should not take place. Well, is your meeting, your event, essential or is it non-essential? Now, that decision is going to be made on a subjective way by people who are going to attend. For a lot of people, they're going to say, well, from my standpoint, it may be essential, but for me personally, because of where I fall within the order of infection potential and the like, I'm not going. I've got to make that personal decision. So we're saying to clients as well, take a survey of those who might be attending your program. Are they still prepared to come? Your sponsors, your exhibitors, the people you rely on to provide the financial good aspect of it becomes so important. So I think what we're looking at right now is a total evaluation. Really, we've been looking at that from the beginning of this whole thing. I think we're now into about the end of the 4th month of having to contest with this. Please, please, please pull all your information together, develop what is your worst case, make those decisions as to when you have to pull the plug, if you're going to pull the plug. That's in the best interest of all concerned. And remember also that wherever you're going, it may be that that location is open, but the people who are coming there may not be able to get in because they don't have the capacity of being able to leave. Sorry for a little slip there. But here's what I think, Dianne, overall. We're dealing with a lot of important decisions, but the key element is, what are the bases for you making those decisions?
Right.
And so what we're going to look at is your schedule, the time you have to make that decision, and then what is the support for making that decision. How far out are we going to go with this? The longer you can wait until you have to make that decision, obviously the better. But having said that, in some situations, what you're going to be looking at is conditions may change. It may open up. But if you go to the CDC guidelines, you'll see that the prospect of you being able to pull off an event with certain governors and localities installing a rule, we can have gatherings, but they can't be more than 10, maybe 50 people. What's the aspect of your event being successful under those conditions?
Right.
So Dianne, do we have any questions?
Yes. Can you hear me, John?
I hear you.
Okay. Yes. So the question, so here's the question. I'll try to paraphrase it a little bit, but just to what you're saying, if this goes into a phase situation, and then we've got different jurisdiction from a city and a state, right? You're booking an event in a city, and then the people who are invited can't get there. So there's that confusion. So to the event company is, if an independent contractor is hired by a planning company and they go out of business or they cancel the event, what recourse is there? Or the event is canceled, you know? Yeah.
Well, I guess we go back to the basics.
Mm-hmm.
And the basic is, what, if anything, does the contract provide between the parties? If you have a volunteer sign-up type of situation where somebody says, well, I'm coming to your event, here's my money, you cancel the event, what obligation you have back to them as to refunding the money?
Right.
Similarly, with the property or the venue, what obligation do you have or they have to get back to you with a refund?
Right, and then you have the situation too, someone's mentioning about, because many events are obviously held in hotels. So with the uncertainty of hotels opening or not, how do you then, I don't know if we lost you, John, you still hear me?
I'm here.
Yeah, okay, so with the uncertainty in a hotel, or if a hotel goes bankrupt and the planner or the event planner is involved, what recourse do they have, or is there any protection they can take now once a contract is written? Is there any?
Well, one thing that's really important is that, as you suggest, and the question suggests, you postpone your program, let's say, until 2021, and you have a substantial deposit that's been left with the hotel.
Mm-hmm.
Number one recommendation, get it back. All of it. Now, if they're not prepared to give it back to you, you may want to set up an escrow for the money that's on deposit. And that somewhat protects you and the property should something happen on either side financially, such as a bankruptcy. If it's an escrow,
Mm-hmm.
the escrow determines what are the terms and conditions upon which that money would be released. And so if the hotel is no longer open or is in bankruptcy, the hotel can't perform.
Right.
That money goes back to you.
Right.
So you need to protect the asset. the money that you have on deposit overall.
Okay, if you have an event in October and want to start looking at options to move it, but the hotel isn't willing to negotiate, what is your advice?
Well, I would go back to the hotel and say, okay, you want us to go forward with our event in October. What saith if you'll give me an affirmation that the hotel will be open, that all of your facilities will be there, that yours will be fully staffed, that everything that's supposed to happen pursuant to the contract will be in place. You'll be able to do the setups, the teardowns, and everything else, and that you're going to help me, assure me rather, that you're going to be able to do that.
Right, now
bet you that the hotel is going to say, I can't do that. So
Right.
then you go back to the hotel and say, or to the venue and say, okay, if you can't do that, you're asking me to do that on my side. Let's see what we can do to make this work for both sides. A lot of times I said, I've been a proponent against the concept of win-win. We're partnership agreements.
Yes.
We want to be able to make it happen, but with the partnership, you share in risk and reward. And right now, we're doing a lot of sharing of risk.
And that's very good, because the other comment that just came in here is I'm having to reschedule my July event, and December is being offered. I'm just not certain if it's doable, but want to be a good partner and rebook in the same year.
Well, again, you have the risk of maybe it won't be COVID-19. It might be the son or daughter of COVID. It might be called something else. Right. And if you listen to the CDC and Dr. Fauci, his concern is that we may be able to get out of this particular syndrome, but it may come back. And we're going to see with some of these states which are opening up early, what kind of return there is of people then watching that curve go back up as opposed to coming back down. So a lot of people say, well, we were looking for a V curve where it goes all the way down, then suddenly accelerates. What a lot of people are saying today, it's going to be a W. It'll go down, go up, and then go back down. So we've got to be very careful. And one of the concerns I have, and I advise clients on this, you got to read the contract as amended as to what that really means to you. And are you still protected should we have that kind of incident of the W as opposed to the V kind of access? The key element here is that we're seeing in some of the contracts that you will see an exclusion made in the force majeure for an infectious disease. And so the key element here, you got to protect yourself, read the fine print. And remember, anytime you make a change in a contract that exists, it has a ripple effect. And you need to really concern yourself with what is the ripple effect in those other 28 pages of the contract.
Yeah, and I know in all of our previous events, John, you've always brought up the relationship factor, and I think that's critical in this, that you said it's not a win-win, it's about partnership. Venue hotel contract cancellation date impacts the timeline of when to make the decision on whether or not to cancel the event later this year. Our event is in late September, but our date to cancel with a minimum penalty, $35K, was due last month. We were able to negotiate a decision date until June. So again, I think this is a case by case, as you said, John.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
Here's the concern too I have. It's a relationship business. Part of the problem right now is the person you had a relationship with has been furloughed or has been laid off. And
Right.
So what we need to be concerned about is finding out who has the opportunity to make the decision. And one of the big concerns I've had over the last several years, in hotels today, in corporations today, the empowerment given to the person on the front line of negotiating has been taken away. I look at this as that the sales manager, the director of sales, the general manager, they're accountable to that person who's in the sub-basement of the hotel with a green eye shade called the revenue manager. And the revenue manager is going to say yay or nay as to what's going to go on. So we have to look very carefully there. On corporate side, we have the director of procurement. And so all decisions there may go to the director of procurement. Now, what's the revenue manager's role in life? Maximize the revenue.
Right.
What's the director of procurement's role in life? Minimize the expense. And so you have this conflict. I've said this before, but if I were going to do a hospitality industry fundraising event, I would have a caged fight. I put a director of procurement on one side, a revenue manager on the other side. They would go at each other, and everybody in the audience would cheer on, hoping they'd kill each other off.
Right.
And,
Well,
and the real
and they
problem
probably would.
is just that fact.
Yeah, they probably would, John. You know what it is like the thing is, the hotels play such a big role, obviously, and for all of us, right? This is where events are held, and hotels basically dictate so much in the industry. I mean, we have one person, just commenting here, and I know we've been through this so much about COVID being included in the force majeure. Any quick comment on that because of time,
Sure.
but just to
I
clarify it.
I would not put COVID in there by name because it may not be COVID the next time around.
Right.
What I would put in there is a broad-based force majeure clause. And force majeure clauses, as we've talked about before, are really misunderstood by a lot of people, including lawyers. The key element is what is going to allow you to be excused from performance because of something you may have some control over, but it makes it impossible or makes it undesirable for you to be able to go forward with the program. And so the key we want to look at is look at your group. What are the things that are going to impact upon their ability, their desire to actually come to and participate in the program? And in a lot of situations, you may be doing a type of program that appeals to people in, the upper C-level type of category.
Mm-hmm.
Those are going to be people who are older, and they are going to be the people who are going to be a little bit concerned. They may be a group of people, especially we have certain groups which are made up of people specifically within a certain challenge medical class, survivors of cancer or whatever.
Right.
Those people, as we know, based upon what the CDC is saying, are part of that criteria as to people who should be very careful in what type of event they participate in. And then the social distancing, then the mask use, et cetera, all come into play. And so my real concern here is I got to look at what your group is, what the expectations are, what is the purpose. And in a lot of these cases, we're able to cancel the meeting out because there's what I call a frustration of purpose for purposes of being able to go forward with the program. Important to put in your contract with any venue is why are you holding the meeting?
Right.
What is the proposition that makes it desirable for people to come to your program? And if that purpose is frustrated, that's a pretty good reason to get out of the contract, or at least have a defense to getting out of the contract.
Right. And as you said many times before, John, it's a case by case. And I know you're not here to give specific advice because everything is so subject to interpretation. But one other question before we lose you for the day, for this time is, and it's just more of a comment, is someone is saying the hotel is, in another question, a different meeting, hotel is willing to move us to 221, but wants to charge the full cancellation amount of expected revenue. They will only apply 25% to the future contract. And is this standard and fair? Is what should I do?
I will tell you, based on our conversations and what my experience is with all of us in our firm, is that we insist on getting all of it back, or maybe we'll leave a percentage behind, but we want credit against that for the future meeting that we're booking. Now, if we don't book it or don't fulfill it, that's a whole different story. Again, we got to look at what the language of the contract is going to provide. But I think from this standpoint, bear this in mind too. Mm-hmm. I've made this comment before. There's about $4 to $6 billion of debt that's going to be coming due here in the next couple of months, which is with hotels. And the hospitality sector. Those properties don't have a cash flow right now.
Right.
So they're desperate to be able to find how are they going to meet their obligations relative to the debt obligations they have. So in some respects, the hotels are going to scramble to get every last penny that they can get in order to cover their debt because they don't have the cash flow right now. So that's an economic thing. But from your standpoint, you want to be protected. So we're going to look at back to the escrow, back to getting the refund of the deposits that you have made. And that becomes important. The key element here is you've got to protect your financial interest because you got to bear this in mind. The other side wants to protect its financial interest, but their chance of not being able to protect yours is pretty high at this moment.
Yes, and you know, John, excellent point. And for all the events people and all the event companies, you know, we all have to read the fine print and make sure we protect ourselves. And if we have to put and negotiate, you know, addendums and issues that are going to protect us in the future, that's our responsibility moving forward. And
absolutely
right, because again, like some people are commenting how, you know, they had to rebook 5 conferences in the last few weeks. It's all about negotiations and hotel revenue. I mean, none of us, I'm going to speak for everyone, none of us want to see a hotel go out of business because of lack of cash flow. But also, we don't want to just be penalized either without.
Well, we don't want to go out of business either, and that's the other side of the coin. And I think Trina will talk a little bit about the economics and some of the aspects of protecting yourself financially. But the key element right now is this is one of those, I say risk reward. We're all sharing in risk, and the key element is how much risk can we sustain realistically, and how much risk can the other side sustain realistically. We're not in the new norm. We're in what I'd like to call the new reality. It ain't going to be a norm. It's going to be dependent upon everything we look at and how it plays one-on-one, venue to planner, planner to attendee, vendor to employee, et cetera, et cetera. We have a whole food chain here that we have to pay attention to. And all of the impact, the ripple effect there is incredible, as we're seeing with layoffs and the like. And how many of those people, if I'm a housekeeper at a hotel, I'm making $12.50 an hour, and I get an opportunity to go work for Walmart or Federal Express or Amazon at $17.50 an hour, I'm going to go there. And what's going to convince me to go back to getting $12.50 an hour to go back to the hotel? So staffing the opportunity for the properties, the venues, to meet their obligation, they're really challenged.
Yeah, they're very challenged. Well, you know what, John?
Tremendous economic impact.
Yes, I know. Well, thank you so much. I mean, we're all challenged, but I think, again, with the events industry, trickle-down effect to that independent performer, people are fair. Let's just keep negotiating. But thank you very much for joining us today. We might see you a little later, right, John?
I hope so.
All right, thanks so much. So